My wife cheated on me with her best friend and demanded I keep paying all her expenses after the divorce. But I disappeared and made sure she lost everything she cared about. I don't know if you've ever felt like the ground was crumbling beneath your feet. That gut-wrenching feeling where everything you believe to be true, everything that gave you stability, suddenly turns into a cruel and twisted lie. That's how it all began for me. But it wasn't a clean cut, no. It was like a knife slowly sinking in, twisting with every second I tried to make sense of what was happening. My marriage wasn't perfect, but whose is? We had our fights, our differences, but I always thought there was respect. That unspoken trust that no matter what, we were a team. Or so I thought. My wife, Clara, had a best friend, Marcos, who had always been a big part of her life. I never saw him as a threat. Why would I? They sold me the story of being like siblings, inseparable since their teenage years. Even at our wedding, he was there, toasting to our happiness, hugging us both with that fake smile that now burns in my memory every time I think about it. It all started on a seemingly normal evening. Clara and I were at home watching TV. Her phone buzzed a couple of times, and she checked it quickly, laughing at something she didn't share with me. It wasn't unusual for her to be in touch with Marcos. They talked often, but there was something about her laugh, about how she shielded the screen from me, that set off alarms in my head. I didn't say anything then, but a sense of unease settled in my chest. Over the next few days, that unease grew. Clara started acting differently. She went out more, came home late, and always had a ready excuse. "It's work," she'd say, or, "I ran into a friend and lost track of time." I'm not stupid. Something wasn't right. So one night, when she left her phone on the table to go to the bathroom, I picked it up. Yes, I know it sounds invasive, but when your instincts are screaming at you, you end up doing things you never thought you would. What I found on that phone took my breath away. There were messages from Marcos, and they weren't casual, friendly texts. They were loaded with a kind of intimacy I didn't recognize. "I can't stop thinking about the last time we were together," one said. Another read, "What will you do when he finds out?" My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I spent the next few hours scrolling through those messages, my hands shaking. Each new text felt like another slap in the face. Photos, secret plans, even references to meetings they'd had while I was at work or away on business trips. I don't know how long I sat there, phone in hand, reading and rereading those messages. At first, rage consumed me, a blind fury that made me want to smash everything around me. But then the sadness hit, a crushing sadness that made it hard to breathe. I thought about all the moments we'd shared, the promises we'd made, the dreams we'd built together. It all felt like a lie. When Clara came out of the bathroom, I didn't say anything. Couldn't. At that moment, I was so shattered I couldn't find the words. But I knew I couldn't stay silent forever. That night, while she slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling, planning my next move. I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew I needed proof. I couldn't let her deny it or spin excuses. What I didn't realize then was that the confrontation would be just the beginning. The betrayal was painful enough, but Clara's arrogance in how she handled it set the stage for a battle I never thought I'd have to fight. I woke up the next day with a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't begin to describe. Anger, heartbreak, humiliation, and above all, a burning determination not to let this destroy me any more than it already had. Clara was acting as if nothing had happened, making coffee like she hadn't just betrayed everything we stood for. Every word she said, every fake smile she threw my way, made my blood boil. But I knew I had to stay calm, composed, and most importantly, strategic. Over the next few weeks, I meticulously gathered evidence. I'm not a vengeful person by nature, but if I was going to confront her, I needed everything in my hands so she couldn't deny a thing. I combed through every message, every photo, taking screenshots and storing them securely. I even planted a small recorder in her car, knowing she often talked to Marcos while driving. The things I heard on those recordings confirmed my worst fears. Smug jokes about how I'd never find out, and laughter as they planned their next rendezvous. Each revelation hit like a blow to the gut, but instead of breaking me, it fueled me. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story anymore. Every word, Every laugh only solidified my resolve. When the time came, I wouldn't just confront her. I'd make her face the consequences of her actions head-on. The breaking point came one night when Clara came home late. I sat in the darkened living room, waiting for her. I heard her tiptoeing through the door, clearly trying to avoid making noise, and something inside me snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't give her that satisfaction. I simply turned on the lamp and faced her with all the evidence I had collected. Her expression when she saw my face was priceless. She knew she was caught, and her initial reaction wasn't to apologize or admit anything. Instead, she glared at me with defiance and disdain. "Have you really been going through my phone?" she said with a sarcastic smile, as if the gravity of her actions was a joke to her. I didn't bother responding. I just handed her a folder containing the screenshots and recordings. The smile disappeared from her face, but what came next was even worse. Rather than showing remorse, she went on the attack. She accused me of spying, called me paranoid, and even had the audacity to blame me for what she'd done. "What did you expect?" she said coldly. "You're always busy with work. Marcos understands me in ways you never could." Her words cut deeper than any knife. I had spent years working hard to provide for us, to ensure we had a comfortable life. I had sacrificed time, energy, and dreams to build something we could share. And now she was throwing it back in my face like it was a flaw. Couldn't hold back anymore. I told her everything I had kept bottled up. I told her about the times I felt alone in our relationship, how I had tried to connect with her but always felt pushed aside. Now I understood why. But the worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was her complete lack of remorse. I decided enough was enough. That night, I told her I wanted a divorce. To my surprise, she didn't look shocked. If anything, she seemed relieved, like she had been waiting for it. What I didn't expect was what came next. Instead of owning up to her mistakes, instead of showing any respect for what we'd shared, she turned calculating. "Fine," she said calmly, "but you'll still cover all my expenses until I can get back on my feet." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Had she completely lost her mind? After everything she had done, she had the audacity to demand something from me? That was the moment I realized I wasn't just dealing with an emotional betrayal. I was up against someone willing to drag me down to save herself. That night, I slept on the couch, but I didn't sleep a wink. While Clara slept soundly in the bed we'd shared for years, I spent the night on my phone, researching every legal step I needed to take to protect myself. I knew the battle ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for it. What Clara didn't realize was that while she was plotting how to manipulate me to her advantage, I was already 3 steps ahead. The next morning, there was a strange emptiness in the air. Clara, acting as if nothing had happened, got up early, made herself some coffee, and sat at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone. Her behavior was unsettling, like the confrontation from the previous night had never even occurred. I kept my distance, watching her every move with a mix of disbelief and disdain. How could she act so normal after everything? That cold indifference only strengthened my resolve. I couldn't let her manipulate me for another second. In the days that followed, Clara seemed convinced that she still held the upper hand. Despite our heated arguments, she carried on with her routine as if nothing was amiss, perhaps thinking she could still exploit my sense of responsibility. But she had no idea that I was already making moves of my own. I reached out to a divorce attorney and laid out everything: the infidelity, the manipulation, the financial exploitation. I wanted to ensure that this process not only protected what was mine, but also stripped her of any undeserved advantage. My attorney was blunt from the outset. I needed to act quickly and strategically. The first step was to freeze all joint accounts. Clara had grown far too accustomed to spending my money like it was hers, and that had to stop. I took measures to ensure that I controlled all future expenses. I left her access to essentials like health insurance but cut her off from everything else. When she realized her cards no longer worked, her demeanor changed dramatically. Her indifference turned into calculated rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she snapped one evening, slamming her purse onto the table. "You can't just leave me without money. We're still legally married." I looked up from the book I was pretending to read, forcing myself to remain calm. Clara, what you can't do is expect me to keep funding your lifestyle after what you've done. You'll have what you need, but the luxuries are gone." Her face twisted with fury, but she couldn't argue. She knew she had no solid ground to stand on. Still, that didn't stop her from trying. Over the next few weeks, she pulled every trick in the book, from feigning reconciliation with hollow words to threatening to make our situation public. But I held my ground. I was no longer the man who could be swayed by her tears or her baseless accusations. Meanwhile, Marcos, the so-called best friend and co-conspirator in this betrayal, had seemingly disappeared. After our confrontation, he vanished from the picture, at least directly. That confirmed what I had suspected all along. He had no genuine interest in Clara. To him, she was just a distraction, something to stroke his ego. But now, with the fallout beginning to take shape, he clearly wanted nothing to do with the aftermath. On my end, I had an ace up my sleeve. I knew how much Clara valued her reputation. Through a trusted contact, I made sure that certain rumors about her behavior found their way into the right circles. I didn't lie or embellish. I simply allowed the truth to surface. Within weeks, her social circle began to crumble. The same friends who had once supported and flattered her started distancing themselves. They realized she had crossed an unforgivable line, and none of them wanted to be associated with her. The emotional strain began to show. Clara was no longer the confident, arrogant woman she had been at the start of this ordeal. She seemed restless, even scared. But I had no intention of stopping. This wasn't about petty revenge, it was about justice. I needed her to face the consequences of her actions and, for the first time, navigate life without me as her safety net. The divorce proceedings gained momentum, and with each step, I gained the upper hand. The evidence of her infidelity and the financial records proving how she had abused our relationship were indisputable. Clara tried to fight back, but with every move she made, her defeat became clearer. I was prepared for this battle. She wasn't. The day Clara received the finalized divorce papers, her mask finally slipped. Until then, she had maintained that arrogant air, acting as if she had everything under control. But when she walked into the house holding that envelope, her expression said it all. She was pale, like the ground had vanished beneath her feet. I watched from a distance, with no intention of comforting her. It was her time to face the reality she had created. "Is this serious, Alejandro?" she said, her voice trembling as she held the papers up like they were a bomb. "Is this what you want? To destroy everything we had?" I almost laughed bitterly. Everything we had? Clara, what you destroyed was what we had. There's nothing left to save. This divorce is just the final nail in the coffin. She collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. At another time, those tears might have tied my stomach in knots. Now they only left me feeling cold. I knew they weren't tears of genuine regret but of fear. Fear of losing everything she had always taken for granted. But my decision was final. There was no turning back. Over the next few weeks, her desperation became more obvious. She tried to regain control of the narrative, reaching out to mutual friends and attempting to convince them that she was the victim. But the truth had already come out, and every attempt she made only made her look more pathetic. The few friends who still spoke to her did so out of politeness, not loyalty. No one wanted to get involved in her mess. Marcos, her so-called best friend, and the accomplice in her betrayal, had vanished entirely from her life. The last I heard about him, he had moved to another city for a new job, avoiding any contact with Clara. She, on the other hand, tried to track him down, probably looking for some kind of support, but it was futile. Marcos had gotten what he wanted and left without looking back, leaving Clara to deal with the fallout alone. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings were moving in my favor. My lawyers were thorough, using every piece of evidence to ensure that Clara wouldn't get her way. There were records of her infidelity, documentation of her extravagant spending habits funded by my income, and witnesses to her manipulative behavior. Everything pointed to the fact that she was not entitled to a single cent more than the law required. She would get the bare minimum, nothing more. The day the divorce was finalized, I felt a mix of relief and satisfaction. It wasn't exactly happiness. This whole ordeal had left deep scars, but it felt like justice. For the first time in a long time, I was in full control of my life, and Clara could no longer exploit me. For her, though, that day marked the beginning of the end. Without my financial support, she had to confront a reality she had never prepared for. Her reckless spending, her taste for luxury, her lifestyle. It was all beyond her means now. She had to move out of our old apartment because she couldn't afford it, and her job barely covered the basics. Initially, her parents took her in, but even they grew tired of her entitlement and made it clear they wouldn't fund her lifestyle. During this time, I was focused on rebuilding my life. The experience had taught me a lot, and I was determined not to let anyone take advantage of me again. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my relationship with Clara, revisited hobbies I had once loved, and began focusing on my personal goals and ambitions. Clara, however, kept trying to insert herself back into my life, as though there was still a sliver of hope for her to reclaim what she'd lost. She sent me messages full of supposed regret, promising to change, claiming she loved me and that we could fix things. But every message only solidified my conviction that I had made the right decision. I knew it wasn't love driving her. It was desperation over having nowhere else to turn. Eventually, after weeks of failed attempts, Clara disappeared from my life completely. The messages stopped, the calls ceased, and her presence faded like a bad memory. I have no idea what happened to her after that, and honestly, I didn't care. I was focused on myself, on my future, and on leaving behind the damage she had caused. The biggest lesson I learned from all of this was that sometimes the best way to win is to let go. Clara had tried to ruin me, but in the end, she was the one who lost everything. I, on the other hand, gained something priceless: my freedom. The last time I heard from Clara was through an unexpected message on social media. It had been almost a year since we finalized the divorce, and by then my life was fully rebuilt. I had regained the confidence she had shattered, my career was thriving, and I was exploring new opportunities in every aspect, including love. Her message was brief but carried a tone I knew all too well, a mix of false nostalgia and veiled desperation.
Alejandro.
I hope you're doing well. I've been reflecting a lot on everything that happened between us. I'd love to talk and maybe find a way to heal the wounds. Please consider this. Heal the wounds. The irony was almost laughable. Clara wasn't looking to heal anything. She was looking for a lifeline. Her life, according to mutual acquaintances, had become a complete disaster. After the divorce, she tried to keep up appearances, pretending everything was fine. But the truth was, she had nothing left. Marcos, her so-called best friend and lover, not only abandoned her but also bad-mouthed her to everyone, ensuring no one in their social circle took her seriously. Her financial struggles had worsened, too. After being kicked out of her parents' house for her entitled and ungrateful attitude, Clara ended up renting a room in a shared apartment with strangers. The woman who once demanded luxury was now living with the bare minimum, struggling to hold onto a job she despised. Her social circle had evaporated as well. No one wanted to associate with someone who had caused so much damage and drama. Clara's message was easy to ignore. I didn't respond because I had nothing to say to her. My silence was my answer. But that wasn't the end of her attempts to re-enter my life. A few days later, I received a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was her, and her voice, once full of confidence, now trembled, as if every word was a struggle. "Please, just hear me out," she blurted before I could hang up. "I know I made mistakes, horrible mistakes. I ruined everything, but I'm desperate, Alejandro. I have no one else." I took a moment to absorb her words. It was clear she had hit rock bottom. But I also knew her problems were no longer my responsibility. Clara wasn't seeking redemption. She was looking for someone else to manipulate, someone to fix her mess. Finally, I spoke, my tone firm but calm. "Clara, I'm not your solution. I wasn't before and I won't be now. Your life is in your hands, not mine. I hope you find what you need, but don't look for it here." She tried to respond, but I didn't give her the chance. I hung up and blocked her number, closing that door for good. In that moment, I felt a massive weight lift off my shoulders. There was no resentment, no anger, just a crystal clear understanding that I had done the right thing. The rest of my life started to flow with an ease I had never experienced before. The ghosts of Clara and everything she represented no longer haunted me. My world was full of new possibilities and people who genuinely valued what I had to offer. The most valuable lesson I took from all of this was that you can't build your happiness on someone else's ruins, and those who try to destroy you are often the first to destroy themselves. Sometimes, I wonder if Clara managed to put her life back together. Not out of concern, but sheer curiosity. But even if she didn't, that's no longer my problem. My focus is entirely on the future, on the people who truly matter and the opportunities that come with newfound freedom. No matter how much someone tries to hurt you, you always have the power to rebuild. And at the end of the day, that's what truly matters.